Some people rock and some people roll. Some will make you giggle right down to your soul. She'll talk to the world and introduce them to you. And look at me now, I'm all Barbara and you. You gotta take a step inside the shoes of another. Get to know your neighbor, get to know one another. She'll talk to the world and introduce them to you. And look at me now, I'm all Barbara and you.
Good evening and welcome to our program. I'm so glad you could join us tonight. And if you watch with any regularity, you know I always let you know who's coming on at 7:30 before I introduce the first guest. So at 7:30, my guest will be Jennifer Dorgan, who is the Executive Director of the Literacy Volunteers of America. And I'm very excited about interviewing her. And my guests in this half of the program are, it's very interesting. I've interviewed people from the New Players Theater Guild many times, and they must just keep growing because I meet new people. There's more people involved there, and they have a new play coming up called Silent Sky, and their director is here with me tonight, Christine Gerton. Hi, Christine.
How are you? Thank you for having us.
This is your debut on the Barbara News Show.
It is, and I'm very excited.
Well, how come I haven't met you before?
I don't know, because I've been in the studio. I've done a couple of things with Sally Cragen and with Stratton, so I've been here, but I've not had the fortune of actually being on your show, so thank you for having me.
Well, my pleasure. And do you prefer to direct or act?
Oh, that's like a loaded question. You know, it depends on the piece. I really enjoy doing both. To be honest, I tend to perform more just because it's a little bit easier. I have a full-time day job that is really, frankly, more than a full-time job. So to only have to be responsible for me and my performance is something that I can do more frequently than to be responsible for directing an entire production. But this piece, when I ever heard, when I ever heard what show they were doing and I read the script, it just spoke to me, and I just felt like it was a story that I had to tell. So I was really compelled to get back in the directing chair, which I haven't actually done in 5 years.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Now, Silent Sky, I know nothing about it. Tell us, first of all, when you're performing it, and a little bit, just enough to tease people to be sure they come.
No problem. We're performing 2 weekends, the weekend of March 9th and the weekend of March 16th. We perform Friday and Saturday evenings, both weekends at 7:30, and we have matinees both Sundays at 2 o'clock. And that's at the New Players Theater Guild, which is right around the corner from the studio here on 15 Rollstone Street.
And unfortunately, I'll be out of town and I'm going to miss this one.
I'm so sorry.
Me too, but I get to see a little bit of it tonight because you brought some of the actors with you.
I did. I actually brought the entire cast, and we have 3 vignettes that we'll be doing later to introduce a little bit about who these characters are and hopefully pique people's interest into wanting to come see the show.
I did not know they were the entire cast.
It is a very small cast, but they're really wonderfully talented and super dedicated, and it's really been a blessing for me to have the opportunity to work with all of them.
Now, as the director, are you the person they audition for and you select who plays which part?
Yes, and really that's about 80% of getting a show right. If you can get the casting right, you know, there are always bumps along the road and difficulties to deal with, but to be honest, they're going to carry most of it. So I have every faith that it's going to be a wonderful production because we were lucky enough to get the right actors into audition.
But it's a bit of a pressure, isn't it? I've judged some pageants and things like that, and you always feel sorry for the ones who aren't selected.
It's awful.
Tell me how you really feel.
Yeah, no,
it
is. It's really hard, to be honest. You know, I have maybe a different perspective now that I've sort of worked on both sides of the table. You know, I know how difficult it is to audition, and I know how awful it is to get that call or that email that, you know, that role that you really wanted to get, that unfortunately, you know, they're not able to offer it to you. It's especially hard when it's children. I do a lot of musicals with like multi-generational casts. And, you know, when you have 100 people audition, there's just no way to get them all on the stage. So it is really, really difficult, you know, to have to make some decisions that are, you know, on the flip side, they make some people extremely happy, and it's, you know, very challenging to deal with on the other side. You know, I try to just know how difficult it is being that actor, and I try to be very respectful about that, but it's probably my least favorite part. I love the casting and giving the positive phone calls. It's a little more difficult on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ted, before we go to our first vignette, tell me a little bit about the play without revealing too much.
Sure. It's actually based on a true story of these women computers who were working at the Harvard Observatory in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The lead character, Henrietta Leavitt, is actually born and lived in Lancaster, Massachusetts for quite a while. And it was interesting that I'd never heard this story before, and it's so local.
But you're saying these women computers, and we just became familiar with that through the movie Hidden Figures.
Exactly.
That the mathematicians were actually referred to as computers.
Exactly, and we do use that term in this play as well. So even before those women in Hidden Figures, there were the women computers at Harvard Observatory. What's fascinating is they were doing all this astronomy work. Most of them weren't even allowed to use the telescope. So they were relegated to an attic room, just looking at glass photographic plates. And from there, they were making these amazing discoveries and observations that are actually certain things that we still use today to be able to measure how far away stars are and how galaxies are. So it's really, for me, just a wonderful opportunity to have a local story that we can actually tell and share with people that I think is probably not super well known.
No, I don't think it is at all, and that's very interesting. So I'm going to let you tell us now about the actors who are going to do the first vignette for us.
Sure. So this first vignette, it's about introductions, because I always love seeing how characters interact when they first meet each other. We have Henrietta Leavitt and Peter Shaw as the characters, and they're being portrayed by Matt Sprague and by Brooke Haley. This is the first time that Peter gets to meet this very, very headstrong woman, and things don't necessarily go swimmingly.
Okay, and our actors are ready. Let's see if our camera people are ready. I think we are. There we go. You're on.
Excuse me, is this the observatory office?
Oh, yes. Hello. You must be my 10 o'clock. Miss Leavitt. Are you Miss Leavitt?
I am, Henrietta Leavitt, and I am thrilled to.
Oh, good. We'll make this quick. It's not that complicated.
May I just say how pleased I am to meet you, Dr. Pickering? I am so honored.
No.
I'm not?
I'm not.
You're not Dr. Pickering.
I am...
You are Dr. Pickering.
So sorry. My name is Peter Shaw. I work for Pickering.
Oh, lovely. Mr. Shaw, nice to meet you. Colleagues, then.
Well, technically you work for me and I work for him, so...
So we're still colleagues, it would seem.
Well, technically yes, but...
And here I thought Harvard was such a technical place.
No, I just mean that... No, I mean, of course it is. It's just that... You see, I'm Dr. Pickering's apprentice, junior fellow in astronomical research, summa cum laude in mathematics and physics.
And if you spot me, I'll swoon.
What?
It's a technical term. Now, Mr. Shaw, I've come a long way and I'm quite anxious to get started. May I? Get started. Or just point me to the telescope and I'll be fine.
The telescope.
Is that it? The Great Refractor?
Well, yes, but...
One of the largest in the world.
I am very aware. Quite a point of pride for us here, but this is the workroom for you girls to work on. In here.
A short orientation, then.
We bring the girls' department photographic plates from the telescope. Latest technology.
Yes, good question. Why all women?
This is great. Pickering got fed up with the boys he was sent, and he really said this, that his housekeeper could do better. So he hired her, and she did better. Now it's quite a woman's world up here.
I was expecting the usual world.
Oh, well, I make regular rounds.
Rounds?
I come around.
To what end?
Evaluation, of course.
Mr. Shaw, I also graduated summa cum laude from Radcliffe, which is basically Harvard in skirts, and lucky for us, the universe doesn't care what you wear, so my expertise and yours might just complement each other's if we can get past this encroachingly unpleasant first impression. Or I can take this out and you can keep orienting.
Oh, that's delightful, delightful. And I can see where your characters are well suited for those parts.
They do a
Thank you.
wonderful job bringing them to
And
life.
send the next players in. Now, obviously, you're in rehearsals, so they're reading the lines mostly at this point.
They're actually completely off book, but because we're doing little vignettes and it's we're starting and stopping in places that they're not used to, I just asked them to bring them here just to have them.
Right, and it is a touching story, and I was very impressed with those two. Oh, and you mentioned Brooke is in each of the vignettes we're doing.
She is. So Brooke plays Henrietta Leavitt, who is the main character in the play, and she is on stage for all but about 2 minutes of the entire play.
Wow.
So she is on all the time.
I'm just so amazed. I mean, even doing this show, I have notes. I'm amazed that people that remember all those lines, and she's very eloquent in her speech. So tell us about this next vignette and the other two actors.
Sure. So this is another introduction vignette. So this is after Henrietta has met Peter. She's actually meeting some of the other women computers. These are all people that are based on real life women. The other two characters are Annie Jump Cannon and Williamina Fleming. Will is played by Val Sholosky. And we have Liz Vestal. Cherico, she got married and I've been working with her for years, so sorry, Liz. Liz Cherico, who's playing Annie Jump Cannon. And this is actually their first introduction. And you will see right away that one of these women just falls in love with Henrietta, the other not so much.
And we're going to see that in this little snippet.
Absolutely.
Okay, take it away, ladies.
Welcome, Miss Levitt.
Thank you. Hello. I was so excited to be here that I fear I might have scared him.
Oh, that's easy to do. Wilhelmina Fleming, and I like you.
Thank you.
Annie Cannon, I haven't decided.
Oh, Miss Cannon, I know I probably shouldn't have gone on like that with him.
No, you shouldn't.
And I'm sorry if I made a poor impression.
Harvard Observatory is the pinnacle of the astronomical community. The academic world looks to us.
To bookkeep the stars if you talk to Mr. Shaw.
Which is why we try not to talk to Mr. Shaw. We are mapping the sky, Miss Levitt. If doing what has never been done before sounds unimportant to you, uninspired, I'd leave before you are asked. Otherwise, show some respect.
Of course, and I would never.
Respect is a quiet thing, Miss Levitt. Practice this.
Yes, Miss Cannon.
Practice now.
Let me show you what we do here. Now, this is a photograph of the stars. It is the latest technology, and we chart every point of light on every one of them.
Every single one.
Every scattered sneeze of them.
Will, don't be crude.
Well, they look like ground pepper until you get the hang of it.
Wilhelmina is our best photometer from whom you'll learn much if she doesn't get herself fired.
I used to be her boss.
You still are. We share leadership of this department.
Oh, she outdid me with her letters.
I did no such thing.
The star classifications were her idea.
A collective effort, I assure you.
Star classifications, that's your work?
Oh, yes, indeed it is. The sky was a riot until Miss Cannon coded it. Now, I wanted to make every star a number based on color, but she insisted on labeling them with letters based on temperature.
Ladies.
O-B-A-F-G-K-M, yes!
You created a standard, Miss Cannon. My goodness, I am so honored. I'm sure you laugh, but my professors made us memorize your letters using this ridiculous phrase.
She made up that ridiculous phrase.
But I didn't mean for it to find its way into textbooks.
Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me? You did that too?
Oh, she had a muse.
Miss Fleming.
Well, she thought it would be best for the boys. After all, that's all they think about anyway.
Let's get back to work, please. Thank you, ladies.
End of the scene. That was great. How do you describe this? Is it supposed to be comedic? Because there's some funny lines.
It's actually funny because I wasn't sure. I had read the play and I had seen it, and I really wasn't sure how it's classified. It is technically classified as a drama, but to be honest, it does have some really light moments. But I always feel like in drama that's really important to be able to have those moments of levity because it gives you a good contrast for when things really do get a lot more serious and a lot more in depth.
And the audience enjoys it when they can laugh.
For sure.
Once in a while. In case you tuned in late, we're talking with Christine Gerton, who is the director of the new play, Silent Sky, by the New Players Theater Guild. And she brought some of the players with her tonight. And I'm kind of making sure we get all of them in.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to cut your interview short, but I don't want to miss any of the vignettes that you brought tonight.
Sure.
And I do appreciate everybody's efforts in getting here and performing for us.
Well, thank you for having us.
And then you're off to your real rehearsal.
We do, because we open in a couple of days, so we're right in the thick of rehearsal.
Wow. Well, I'm sure you're comfortable with how far they've come since they got the parts.
Oh, they're so tremendously talented, and the effort that they put in really shows. They're doing a wonderful job.
And the star of the show, Brooke, who's she with this time?
Well, so this is interesting because Brooke is with Kirsten. Their last name is both Haley because they're sisters. And in the show, they play sisters. So they had a sisterly bond right away, which really did show, in their first audition. This is a scene that happens a little bit later on, and it's interesting because their relationship has a lot of You know, it's like being with your sister. There are good moments, there are really difficult moments, and this is sort of back when they're a little bit older and they've learned to sort of accept who they are for each other.
Did you know they were sisters when you cast them?
I did. I actually have worked with Kirsten before.
Okay.
I've directed her, and I did know her older sister, and so I was aware of it, and it just worked out beautifully.
Well, we're going to see right now. We'll
Great.
get a little taste of what the play's all about. Go ahead, ladies.
I think it's time we built you a study for all these boxes.
I'm sorry.
Or a ranch.
I can move them. I know it's a lot. They've been sending more and more, which is a good thing. I want to work. I need to work.
And now that things are calm, you should think about going back. Don't look so excited. I'm not being nice. I just can't stand all these boxes in my house. And Daddy would have wanted you to go.
Why are you so good to me?
Because I'm a saint and you're so easy to pity.
I accept that. Can I take your son with me? He knows 3 whole constellations.
Yes, boys in glassware is a good idea. Sorry. It amazes me that the entire sky fits on these little window panes, and how shockingly full it all is. It doesn't look that full from the backyard, but each one of them is just bursting with stars.
And nebulae. There and there.
My goodness, it's a whole other world up there.
Or worlds. You know, they call me a fiend.
Who calls you a fiend?
A star-finding fiend. One of the most prominent astronomers at Princeton said that about me.
You're important to them?
I am, actually.
They're not taking advantage of you.
Oh, they surely are, but it's a compliment.
A love letter's a compliment?
We talked about this.
Sitting at Harvard and you can't find a gentleman?
My department's all women.
Well, get out!
It's complicated.
Wouldn't be romance without. Is it?
What?
Romance!
No, not yet.
And who is this not yet?
What about your music?
What about your secret fancy?
Margie, it's nothing. It's a boring story with a boring ending.
Why?
Because it ended. Or it didn't really start. It's unclear.
I'm sorry.
That was never in my plan anyway.
Well, maybe it's your plan that's boring.
That's it. I always feel bad for performers when they're here because we don't have applause for them. So
Well, hopefully there'll be lots of that on Friday when we open.
There will be. Now, give me the setting again. What year was?
So this particular play, it's set between probably around 1900 at the start, and it spans 20 years, so it goes to about 1920.
But we don't think about working women in those days.
No, and that's why it was so unusual. This was, in fact, an entire department of women, and they were brilliant women astronomers.
And they were all very well educated. Again.
Well, it's interesting. Some were and some weren't. There is a story in the play about Williamina Fleming, who, and we talked a little bit about this in one of the scenes, about her being a housekeeper, and Dr. Pickering brings her to the observatory. That is actually a true story. She was his housekeeper. He got very, very frustrated with the men working at the observatory, so he figured he'd give her a try. Turns out she was brilliant. So even though she was not well educated, she could be trained to do this work and was, a pioneer.
I'm always in awe of all of you dedicated theater people because you devote so much time, and it's amateur work. I mean, not the quality is not amateurish, but you all have, most of you have full-time jobs. You mentioned you have a rather demanding job.
I do.
And when you're directing, you feel like you're responsible for every part of the play, I would presume.
Well, to some extent, yes. I mean, I certainly have people who are responsible for I have a stage manager and various other designers doing lighting design and those sorts of things. But overall, I'm still responsible for making sure we have the right staff in place and that the vision that we're all working toward is, it's all, a cohesive sort of experience.
What frustrates you?
About directing? I think what's really, for me, the most difficult is 2 things. First of all, I wish I had more time to put into it. When I really only direct pieces that I feel super passionately about and that I really do want to throw myself into. But unfortunately, I do have a day job and I work a lot of hours. Actually, ironically, I'm a scientist as well, although not an astronomer. I work in life sciences and I develop cancer drugs.
Oh, wow.
But it's extremely demanding to do that. And my hours are sometimes a little bit weird. So there are times like right before rehearsal, I'm on conference calls. So it's really difficult sometimes to be able to be as focused and as clear as I would like to be and to be able to dedicate that time to, okay, I'm doing whatever, whether it's a rehearsal or dealing with the designers, that kind of thing. The other thing is it's sometimes difficult to let go because I'm not doing everything and I don't have the time to, and frankly I don't want to. So it's a matter of how much oversight do I give people when I want to give them enough room to be able to show their own creativity, but still making sure it's part of the whole vision so that we end up with a cohesive show in the end.
Well, I think I can relate to what you're saying because I'm a full-time real estate agent. And there are days that it's a very hectic day and I think, do I really feel like doing a TV show tonight? But when I get here, lights, camera, action, I love it and I never leave here sorry that I came. And probably once you get to the theater, it's a different mindset.
Actually, it's really one of the reasons that I do it, because otherwise it would be so easy to just work all the time and I could work a ton of extra hours. And to be honest, actually doing theater I think is really good and helpful for me. Definitely from a work-life balance perspective, but because I've done so much work on stage, I do a lot of, I run a lot of meetings. I actually often have to present at the FDA, and I'm very accustomed to presenting in front of people, on plays or if I'm singing in a recital. So those skills are something that I actually can take and use in my work as well.
Mm-hmm. So you're a singer as well as an actor?
Oh yeah, a little bit of everything.
What's been one of your very favorite roles?
Oh God, I think one of my favorites was playing Lucy in Snoopy. Lucy Van Pelt.
Oh, really?
My husband laughed that it wasn't much of a stretch for me, and I don't know if I should be insulted by that or not.
Well, you did a good job, I'm sure. And speaking about myself being a realtor, if I'm showing property in the area, I always brag about how fortunate we are to have New Players Theater Guild, and you mentioned Stratton, and then I throw in Theater at the Mount, which isn't that far away.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the people, local theater people have performed at all three. But I mean, the quality of the theater we get to see here in North Central Mass without trucking to Boston and paying an exorbitant figure to park the car and get home really late. It's just wonderful that this is available to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful thing to be part of and to have those opportunities as a performer, but you're right, as an audience member, there's tons of amazing theater that I get to see around here, and it's actually interesting how many professional careers have been launched out of community theaters in Central Massachusetts. The quality is that good, and there's really sometimes I think a blurred line between what's professional and what's amateur. Sometimes I think it's more just a choice of what you want to do for a living to actually pay your bills as opposed to a talent situation.
Well, and when I talked about the time invested and you've got a family and your husband says, oh, you're not going to be home again tonight or whatever. But I think you kind of have to look at it as a hobby. Like some people play golf, some people go to football games or whatever, and is theater, does that fill a void for you as far as I don't mean to put it down by calling it a hobby, but
I think it's fair to say. I mean, I do have a number of hobbies, but theater for me, it's a great way for me to be able to express myself artistically. And when I work in the sciences, sometimes a lot of what we do tends to be black and white. And this is a place where I can actually just let loose a little bit and actually try to make art and something that that I'm proud of and that I can stand behind, and that's just so completely different than what I do during the day.
And when did you get the bug?
Oh God, I started performing at 3. I was actually one of those, those competitive dancers for Dance Moms. But I realized when I started getting into high school that just competitive dance was not for me. It's a real cutthroat world, and it wasn't fun anymore. So I started getting into theater because it was a way I could dance and actually really enjoy myself. Then I actually had to learn how to sing because there's no way to do musicals and avoid that. And I've just sort of been hooked on it ever since. I felt like it's a really great way to be able to, sort of flex all of those muscles. I do some singing, some acting, some dancing. I direct as well, and it's just fun to just sort of step out of the box that I think people would normally expect to, put me into.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking back to you saying that you feel less pressure when you just have to worry about your own role.
It is true, except for opening night. Opening night when I'm on stage, that's another thing. As a director, by opening night, I hand the show off. I'm handing it off to it's now the stage manager's show, it's now the cast show, it's now the production team show.
You've done all your work.
That's it, I just sit back and watch, which is a little nerve-wracking in its own way, but it's also, I have trust in the people that, that we have assembled as part of the cast and crew, so it's bittersweet for sure.
Well, earlier, before we went on the air, the group was talking, and I heard somebody say something about the boss, and I said, oh, in this place, I'm the boss. And when I tell people, I'm often accused of being bossy, and I say, well, it comes from being a mother. I raised 7 kids. You got to take charge.
Sure.
So as a director, though, is it easy to tell somebody, oh, I want you to do that differently?
You know, it depends. Some people are easier to direct than others because some of it is just, am I able to communicate in a way that they understand what it is I'm telling them? And, you know, being able to communicate in different ways is very helpful. You know, what I think is challenging, and this is my challenge everywhere, I tend to be a very direct person, and there's not always a filter between my brain and my mouth. So sometimes what I'm thinking, it just comes out, and it may not be in the most polite way. So sometimes it's good if I can take a step back and just take a minute to think and figure out how do I deliver that same message in a little bit of a kinder way.
But aren't actors kind of conditioned that the director is the boss and you can't take it personally, you can't get offended?
Oh, for sure, but we're all human beings too, so I know, again, from having been on the other side of the table, it can be difficult, especially sometimes if you don't necessarily understand what it is they're trying to get you to do. This cast actually has been super wonderful in that it hasn't been difficult for me to communicate with them at all. You know, they're really open to trying things in different ways, and you know, through that, we've really been able to explore these relationships with all the characters, because you know, this is a play that spans 20 years. There's a lot of personal change that happens in 20 years and a lot of change that happens between all of those characters. So it's been really wonderful to watch them grow as a cast, watch them gel as a cast, but then watch how that's actually spilled over into the characters.
So are we going to see them age on stage?
That's a good question. Probably maybe a little bit, but it's not something that I want to focus on because really I think some of the themes of the show are more important. There's a lot of talk just about, I mean, obviously this is a show about women scientists in a time period where that was very unusual. So there's talk about, you know, inequality, if you will. But it's also interesting to see how some of them learn to stand up for themselves, and Annie Jump Cannon becomes a suffragette. And that actually is also something that happened in real life. There's also a lot of talk too about legacy and what is a legacy and what do you leave behind, and can you be at peace with that? So those are the sorts of themes that I wanted to concentrate more on, whether they're really aging or not.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've heard some directors say that you kind of have to give the actors a bit of a free rein, and sometimes they'll throw something in that works perfectly that you wouldn't have thought of. And I relate to that because if I come here to interview you with a set list of questions, and if I'm not paying attention to what you're saying, I may miss something really good.
Sure.
So how do you feel about that? Are they able to improvise at all?
You know, I think they do a really good job with that. My philosophy about directing, particularly with straight plays, is that I'm just part of the process with the actors, and we're all trying to find those characters together. So I try to give them a place to start from. And then from that point on, we're all just playing. We're all trying to figure out who the characters are, and they try things, and then I'll suggest other things. And through all of that, we're, as a whole cohesive unit, I think able to do a really good job to dig in and get a better understanding of who those characters are and how to portray them in a way that they'll be accepted well by the audience and they'll understand that work.
Well, and speaking of the audience, before I let you go, I want you to, you can look right into that camera and give all the information about the plays. And tickets are usually available. You can reserve them ahead of time, but tickets, there's usually some available at the door.
Yeah, and I don't think that'll be a problem. For straight plays, we tend to not necessarily sell out, but by all means, if you want to reserve in advance, that's wonderful. The shows are 2 weekends. We start March 9th, and we also run the weekend of March 16th. We have shows on the Friday and Saturday evenings at 7:30, and matinees both Sundays at 2 o'clock. Tickets are available at the door, or you can reserve them at nptg.org. We'd love to see people there.
And you're in your own theater. That's Rollstone Street.
It is Rollstone Street, yes.
It used to be a church, and you people have done a wonderful job converting it into your personal theater. Thank you, Christine, so much for being here. And please thank all the actors for me. And now I'll let you all go off to your official rehearsal.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. And don't go away. After a few promos, I'll be right back with my next guest.
Welcome to Inside Fitchburg. I'm your host, Alex Cardinale. Inside Fitchburg is pretty much a showcase of that work that folks are doing. A lot of conversation is really being steered in a really positive direction, and more is being found out, I feel, now, which is really exciting stuff. Hey, we're back. I didn't have a microphone on. Live TV, everybody. I think you're one of the examples of what the city really needs, and that's, young, energetic folks investing. You guys look great for 150. Do what you love and you don't work a day in your life. Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton. If you haven't, James Lipton he's an old guy with a beard. And what Fitchburg is a lot of really good people working toward a better future for the city.
And my next guest is Jennifer Dorgand, who is the Executive Director of the Literacy Volunteers of America. Quite a nice title to have. And I mentioned last week when I was telling people who was going to be on this week, I did mention the late Gloria Mayberry, who was a dear friend of mine. And Gloria was she was in your position, and she was the face of Literacy Volunteers of America in North Central Massachusetts, at least. And while she was very outgoing and always wanted to be promoting the agency, she never wanted to come on my TV show. And we lost her a few months ago, and many of us who knew her didn't even know how sick she was. So I just wanted to be sure we want everybody to know we are having this program in honor of Gloria Mayberry. And Jennifer, I believe you told me when we met that you had not had the pleasure of meeting her, but you certainly heard a lot about Gloria.
I feel like I met her because every day that I go into our office, her old office, now my office, I'm just surrounded by the work that she did tirelessly every day. She just was so committed to the mission of the organization, and she would work long days just trying to do everything that she could to help the people that we served. And what she did over 20 years is really phenomenal. So I'm surrounded by her connections, her friends, her achievements. And I did have the pleasure of talking to her on the phone numerous times. So I feel that she got to know me a bit, and I certainly feel like I know her well, and she feels like a friend to me. So it means a great deal to everyone involved to be able to continue her legacy.
Well, that is important, and I appreciate that. And I think some of us have talked about the fact that Gloria did things the way she wanted as far as not letting everybody know how sick she was.
Yes.
So we were very saddened when she passed. But tell me a little bit about yourself. You were a very young person to be in such an important position. How'd that happen?
Well, I started volunteering with Literacy Volunteers when I was fresh out of college, and I'm actually from Connecticut, so this was in Waterbury, Connecticut. I was trying to figure out what to do with my German degree because I had changed my mind after originally thinking I was going to go into international business. I had become more and more interested in education, so I started volunteering as an English to speakers of other languages tutor in Waterbury, and just realized, wow, what a great organization, what a great way to make a visible difference in the issues that we see in our community. So it was really my introduction to nonprofit administration, which to me had never been presented as a viable career path. I think the assumption is that it's something that volunteers do. It's not necessarily something that you can make a living doing. And I actually ended up doing a number of other things between then and now before pursuing my nonprofit management certificate, and realizing that I could make being a Literacy Volunteers director my life's work.
You must be older than you look, and I'm not asking how old you are, but if you don't like looking young, you will as the years go by. But let me just to kind of clue the audience in, first of all, on how we met is I was going to hear my grandson, or was Sterling fifth grade at Sterling, night at Barnes & Noble or something like that. And I walk in and here's this lovely young lady at the front door, and she introduced herself. And when she said, I'm the executive director of Literacy Volunteers of America, I'm like, no, you're not Gloria Maybury. But we had a nice chat, and I invited Jennifer to come on the program. Jennifer with a G, mind you. Your mother was creative, but you have
My father,
Oh, was your
actually.
father, but you always have to tell people. It's
Yes.
Jennifer with a G.
Yes, I do.
But also, I want to rewind a little bit because I just jumped right into learning more about you. But I don't want to assume that everybody watching knows about Literacy Volunteers of America. So give them a basic definition of why it exists and what it does.
Sure. So we've been around for decades. So our local affiliate is Literacy Volunteers of the Montechusett area. So that's the Fitchburg office that I run. We've been around since 1973. And it was around that time that the Literacy Volunteers organizations started forming to address basic literacy, expanding access to literacy instruction and English language instruction based on the needs in our communities. So there were committed people out there who wanted to put in the hard work into volunteering as tutors to help people who, because they didn't have access to literacy instruction or English language instruction, were not able to achieve their potential as members of their community. And so it originally began as just a group of volunteers working very hard, and eventually became integrated into the state's public education system. We now receive funding from the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education as part of the adult basic education funding.
How long have you actually been in this position?
Only since last August, so it's been about 7 months.
Okay. And you mentioned that you were a major in German? Mm-hmm. And do you speak other languages besides English and German?
Well, I speak a little bit of Spanish and Italian. I do my best to get by with our students who speak Spanish, but it's always a humbling experience, I have to admit.
Let me tell you what a humbling experience is. I am feeling very humble when I'm around people who speak more than one language. I don't know that I could ever have an aptitude to learn another language, and it just must be so difficult to think in a different language, and I know a lot of people that are multilingual, and I have great admiration for anybody that can speak more than one language.
Yes, and what I think makes it especially difficult for our students is that they are trying to support themselves and their families at the same time as they're trying to learn English and adjust to life in the United States. So that level of empathy for them, of having been in the experience of trying to learn another language and realize how difficult it is, particularly when the stakes are as high as they are for our students. It's really important to be able to see that.
What do you mean the stakes are as high as they are?
So our students come from their home countries, our English language learners, they come from their home countries either to find a better life or sometimes because they really have no choice because of the conditions that they're under in their home countries. And so they come to the U.S. and oftentimes with their families, and they just have to do the best they can to get by and to provide for their families. And really our English language learners who come to us, they're the cream of the crop. They are hardworking. They have lots of other things really that they need to be doing, but they come to us because to them their English is not sufficient to achieve their personal and professional goals, and they're ambitious. A lot of them were highly educated professionals in their home countries. They often want to start businesses in the United States using the skills that they had in their home countries. So They are doing the best they can to support themselves and their families in the United States and better themselves.
So are the students that come to Literacy Volunteers, are they all adults?
Yes, we serve adults and out-of-school youth 16 years and older. Anybody younger than 16, really the public schools are the ones who serve that population, and we are part of the adult education system. Now, there are a lot of adult education providers who run classes, and so they serve that population too, but we are unique in that we offer flexible, personalized, confidential tutoring to adult learners. And particularly as far as our basic literacy students are concerned, adults who read at a 6th grade level or below, that there often simply aren't classes that serve them. And for our English language learners, they are often so busy with their jobs and taking care of their families and everything else that they don't have time to attend classes. So it's really important to provide them with another option, and that's what we do.
Well, how do you teach language differently than it's taught to children in school?
Well, adult learners are very different from children because they have a whole set of experiences that they can draw on when they're learning. So they're able to reference a much broader context than children are. And that makes a big difference when teaching, say, language, when you can reference the grammar of your first language. It can help you pick up the grammar of your second language more quickly. Or with basic literacy instruction, you can draw on your understanding of a topic, and that will help you approach a text and get meaning out of it more easily than if you were a child and didn't necessarily have that experience.
Two thoughts came to me while you were saying that. One is, I've thought for years that another language should be taught conversationally the way babies learn to speak. Toddlers learn to speak. You just speak it, and then later you learn the rules. But in school, a lot of what they have to learn is kind of boring. The grammar and the punctuation and all of that. You know a lot more about it than I do. Would you speak to that?
Certainly. Well, we are all about teaching conversation. Conversational English is the goal of our English, ESOL, English to Speakers of Other Languages program. And the thing is that every learner is different. Some learners are going to find studying grammar and mechanics very boring and are going to pick up on spoken English a lot more quickly without that. Others might have had English language instruction in their home countries, but didn't necessarily learn to speak it. Those of us who have taken Spanish or French in high school and remember taking it for 6 years and studying the grammar, but not really being able to speak it at all can relate to that, I'm sure. But they have the grammar, and that is important. That's an important resource in the tutor's toolkit. When the tutor is working with them on their English, it can help clarify certain things. For myself personally, as a student of language, I can't really retain any new words or new sentence structures unless I see them written out. And everybody's brain is different, and language learning really brings that to the forefront. So the reason why it's so important that we have a customized program that arises out of the one-on-one setting in which our tutors and students meet is because all of our students are different. And so our tutors and students typically meet for about 2 hours a week, but they make that 2 hours really count because of the way that it's customized, the individual student, their learning style, and their needs.
So we're not talking classrooms here.
That's right.
Oh, so everyone who is a volunteer tutor actually sits and talks with somebody.
That's right.
How do you get your volunteers? What criteria do they have to become a volunteer?
So the only official requirement is that they've completed high school. And other than that, anybody who's interested in becoming a volunteer just needs to basically be culturally sensitive and have the open-mindedness to work with people who have just a totally different background than them. Speaking another language is not required. In fact, in some ways it's better if the tutor doesn't know the student's first language, because that way the student can't fall back on that if they're struggling with something in English. And teaching experience is not required either. We have a training that is 18 hours in total, 6 3-hour sessions, and it teaches volunteers the skills that they need to know in order to work one-on-one with a student, either in English or in basic literacy, and to design customized lesson plans and a customized curriculum for their student based on the individual student's needs. And the training is interactive, it's hands-on, it's a lot of fun. 3-hour sessions sound pretty long, but it just flies by, I assure you, yes.
But you have criteria that they follow, I would assume. They're not making up their own curriculum.
Well, we have suggestions, we have models, we have resources.
Okay.
I am a resource for our tutors, and if they ever get stuck, I'm here to help. But the goal of the training is for the tutor to be able to assess what the student needs and design their own lesson plans and their own curriculum to meet those needs.
Wow. And when you mentioned it might be better if they don't speak another language, that's really surprised me. And you said you struggle with your Spanish, but you really had studied it for 6 years?
I did.
Oh my goodness. But see, I would think it would be beneficial that if they're not getting something in English, that you could speak to them in their native tongue to help them understand the English.
Yes, it depends really on what you're teaching them. If you're teaching vocabulary and it's concrete topics, like teaching a student how to say a table, you know, it's a little quicker if you can point to a picture of the table or look up a table in a bilingual dictionary and translate it for them. But when it gets to grammar and more abstract topics, it's actually better for both the tutor and the student to challenge themselves, to get the student really thinking in English, to be able to articulate those kinds of things.
Years ago, I knew a young man who, I knew him as an adult, but he was brought to the United States with his German parents. Mm-hmm. And I guess it was in the summertime because he didn't start school right away, but he taught himself English from watching TV. And I guess that's possible because if you're visualizing what they're doing when they're talking about it. And I think years ago, with some of the immigrants years ago, the children would go to school and would learn English and come home and translate to their parents. So they were bilingual, and maybe the parents never mastered the language. I'm talking years ago. Mm-hmm. So if this is not a classroom setting, where do people have their one-on-one meetings?
So tutors and students, once the tutor finishes the training, I match them with a student, and I try to do the best I can to match them based on compatible personalities as well as scheduling and that sort of thing. Of course, their schedules have to be compatible. Then I put the student and the tutor in touch, and they determine a mutually convenient time and place. So most of our student-tutor pairs meet at the public libraries in the area. So the Fitchburg Public Library, where our main office is, Leominster, we have a number of students in Ayr and Gardner, and scattered throughout some of the other smaller towns in the area, like Townsend and Groton. So the library is the most common setting. Some of them meet in coffee shops or something like that as well, or even businesses owned by the student or members of the student's family.
Well, your job as executive director is multifaceted, isn't it?
Certainly.
The matching is a big part of it.
The matching is, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. I love the whole connecting with new people, meeting new students, meeting new tutors, training the tutors, supporting the tutors and students. I love that part, but that's not even the half of it. Grants administration takes up a big part of it as well. So making sure that our funders know that we're being responsible stewards of the money that they're entrusting in us, and keeping them in the loop as to what we're doing through things like reporting student progress, and that sort of thing is also a big part of my job.
So where do your finances come from?
Our finances come from two major grantors, the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and then the United Way of North Central Massachusetts. And that's the bulk of our funding. We raise enough to cover about 5% of our operating budget through the Barnes & Noble fundraiser, and additional funding comes from smaller private donations throughout the year.
And again, that's a big portion of your job.
Yes.
Is making sure there are enough funds.
Absolutely.
What are the numbers? Is there a waiting list for people? Oh, and do the students pay any fee at all?
No, the tutoring is absolutely free.
Okay. And do you have a waiting list? Do you need more volunteers? Listen up, folks.
Yes, we have a waiting list. We always need more volunteers. Currently, students have to wait about 4 to 8 months to be matched with a tutor. Yes. So every time we have a volunteer, we can change a life. I mean, the effects of the services that we provide to students just have profound differences in individuals' lives and in our community. Our students are able to do things like, I've mentioned opening businesses, participate in community activities like senior center activities, participate in the economy, as consumers, they're able to run errands on their own, go shopping. They're able to advance in their jobs, become more skilled employees, and just find greater personal fulfillment. So there are all of these very visible and far-reaching ways that volunteers' work changes a student's life and the lives of people around them. So it's not a casual volunteer commitment. It is a lot of work, but it's a lot of work for a tremendous reward, and we always need new volunteers.
And you always have a waiting list.
We always have a waiting list.
So we don't need to worry about getting the word out to people that you're there to help people.
That's right. Word of mouth is actually the main way that our students find out about us.
Right.
The word travels fast about the kind of service that we provide because it has been so helpful to their family and friends.
Mm-hmm. What is the most difficult part of your job? You have a lot of different duties.
Yes.
What's the struggle, the part that's a struggle?
It's trying to do the most I can with limited resources, whether it's time, and time is really the biggest one, mm-hmm. And funds, and tutors. Whenever somebody comes to me looking for help and I can't help them as quickly or as effectively as I'd like to, that gets me a bit.
You used a phrase earlier about a tutor's toolkit. What
Mm-hmm.
did you mean by that?
So our tutors are trained to be able to assess the student's situation and how they can help them. So things in a tutor's toolkit involve facts about the student and circumstances of the student's life that they can cater the program towards, as well as the resources provided by our program, such as our lending library of books, and the expertise provided by myself and the Greater Literacy Volunteers Network. We are really working on providing services for our tutors, and we just started a tutor book club that's going to meet for the first time in April, and that kind of thing. So I actually worked in a corporate job before this, and I approach our volunteer base from a customer service perspective. I really want to make sure that everybody has a really positive experience volunteering for us. So we are going to try going forward to have more support services and social events and that sort of thing for tutors.
Now, we're familiar with the term ESL, English as a Second Language, and is that term used in school settings where literacy volunteers is different? But
yes,
English is the goal, and it doesn't matter where the student, what their native tongue is. English is the goal.
That's right. We use ESOL, English to speakers of other languages, instead of ESL, English as a second language. We feel that ESOL better reflects the reality of our students who might speak many languages in addition to their first language in English, and we don't feel like it creates a hierarchy where, you know, they will always speak English as a second language, whereas we will always be the native English speakers.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Can you, without naming names or being too specific, but give me one really heartwarming circumstance of a life that was changed?
Yes, I can. So we have, like I've mentioned, a lot of students who had skills in their home countries that when they first get to the U.S., they're prevented by language and cultural barriers from pursuing. These include things like being an engineer, or in some cases being an artist. We have...
I have to warn you, you only have a minute to finish that
thought. We have one student who produces
a
beautiful kind of art in her home country, inlaid woodcuts.
Okay.
She, since coming here and receiving our tutoring, is able to have a website with her art, and hopefully eventually a gallery opening, and even teaching art classes. So she's both participating in the community and the economy and the cultural life of the greater Twin Cities area, and is also able to achieve a greater personal fulfillment than she otherwise would have.
Well, I'm glad you were steered away from corporate and into nonprofit, which you said wasn't taught to you as a way to go. And obviously you've found your niche, and it's obvious that you enjoy what you do. And now give a 20-second commercial why people should volunteer.
If you would like to make a difference in your community about issues that seem overwhelming, you can really make a visible personal difference and make great friends, form great relationships with your students and other volunteers.
Okay, well, very well said, my dear, and I'm so glad you accepted my invitation to come and share with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
And I, of course, thank you for watching, and I am going to be away for the next 2 weeks, but we're going to repeat some of our best shows ever, so please tune in. And remember, we call it Barbara and You because of you out there as the audience and as the people who make up the guests on my show. So I thank everybody for all the support that I receive, and I'm off on vacation. I hope I get out before the snowstorm comes. Anyway, this is Barbara Foster saying good night. God bless you, and I'll be back soon.